So it might be that the journal that you're picking only publishes review articles. It doesn't publish any original research articles. So then it's useless, all right? So it's always recommended that you actually choose the journal, you pick a journal, okay? Or at least you have 1 or 2 journals in mind, and then you sit down and write your manuscript, okay? Good. So when you are talking about publishing, of course, as I already mentioned in the beginning, I try to reiterate this point. That is, of course, your aim is not only to publish quickly, but of course have and make an impact in your field of work. All right. So for that, you of course you have to choose the most appropriate journal as the first thing to reach your target audience. And the second most important part is that you have to communicate the importance and the relevance of your study to the journal editor. You have to convince the journal editor that your work is suitable for publication or is worth publishing, all right? So for choosing the appropriate journal, so the question is that the most important or the most significant question here is that how many of you think that is the journal with the highest impact factor? That the best journal for you is the journal with the highest impact factor? No? No one? Okay. Actually, yeah, the answer is not necessarily not. Well, before I move on, I want to ask you, does everyone know what an impact factor is? Anyone who doesn't know what an impact factor is? Everyone is familiar? Okay. Don't know? Okay, few. Okay, and the rest of you are familiar. So impact factor is basically a number, all right? It's actually a ratio, so to say. It's calculated in a way that the ratio is the total number of citations. Let's say there is a journal A, all right? And so first, the numerator of the impact factor is the total number of citations that all the articles in journal A have received in the previous 2 years. So if it's the impact factor of 2018, so the numerator contains the total number of citations from 2016 and 2017, and the denominator has the total number of citable items, so which are basically the articles which were published in the previous 2 years. Okay, so this is a number which actually, this is the ratio which I said, which is an indicative factor basically. All right, so about which actually conveys the importance or the relevance of the journal. So it's basically a ratio, and it's given out by the Journal Citation Reports. It's probably maintained by Clarivate Analytics. It's a company called Clarivate Analytics, and it's released every year around June, I think. Yeah, June, end of June. So we still haven't received the 2017 impact factor yet. So it should come, I think, by the end of this month. All right. Yes, please. No, there is nothing like that. There is nothing like that. There is only one impact factor. There is another one which is called a 5-year impact factor. There is an impact factor and there is a 5-year impact factor. This is the first time I heard something like a global impact. I'm pretty sure that these are some goofy journals. All right. Yeah, we'll talk about that. That's very interesting, actually. Yeah. Yeah. These are, there are a lot of these funny journals, which are doing good business. Luckily for them. No, the total number of citations it has received all over. The total number of citations it has received in all the index publications. Not in the same journal, obviously not. No, sorry? So that's why I said, so it's maintained by a company, as far as I remember, it's called Clarivate Analytics. And it's mentioned by, isn't it? No, that was before, I think. No, I'm not sure now. Maybe Thomson Reuters. But yeah, they release the annual journal citation report, and they do these calculations, of course. So this is the impact factor is, of course, is something very, very reliable and very trustworthy. All right, just the impact factor. I mean, I'm not talking about any XYZ impact factor. All right. So, journals don't have H index. So that's the authors. I mean, you're talking about the authors. H index for journals. All right. Okay, maybe this is the same way in which they calculate the H index for authors or for scientists. Yeah, but I think the most important parameter for any journal is the impact factor. I mean, actually, yeah, it doesn't make sense. That's the point. So what really counts for journals is the impact factor. Actually. Yes, exactly. That's what I mean. Yeah. Right. All right, so then so all of us agree here that of course the most appropriate journal for you is not necessarily the journal with the highest impact factor. Yeah, it's strangely, I personally admit, when I started doing my PhD, I always thought that, it was very, very kind of tempting. I always wished that, it would be wonderful, if I could publish in a very high impact journal, because everybody dreams of publishing in these high impact factor journals. But of course, I soon realized what was the ground reality. But yeah, that's a different story. Anyway, so the fact is that your goal is that your idea is not to publish in a very high impact factor or the highest impact factor journals, because you have to remember that all articles published in these very high impact factor journals don't receive the same number of citations. So of course, it doesn't mean that if you publish in a very high impact factor journal or the highest impact factor journal that you will be widely read. So your idea is, of course, to pick the journal that maximizes the impact of your work by reaching out to the correct target audience. All right? So you should choose a journal in such a way so that you can reach the maximum number of your intended readership. Okay? So the key here is, what we always say is that your focus should be on the impact of your work, the impact of your article, rather than the impact factor of the journal. Okay? All right. So now when we are talking about like how to pick a journal, so here are a few key questions or like points. Yes. Yes.
Impact factor. What's the difference between impact factor and ABDC ranking, and which one is better? Some people may say that okay, we have to go for A-star journals.
Okay, I never heard that. What is this ABDC ranking? But yeah, it's what it all matters is the impact factor. That's what I mean. What do you mean by the rankings? You talking about the indexing, or who asks for that?
No, there is a list of journals with the impact factor and also ABDC ranking, like A-star, B.
But that is based on the impact factor, isn't it?
Not exactly. And some of the journals which are having highest impact factor, they are not in the list of ABDC.
No, I think that's a local.
I am not sure about that.
Classifying. So in journals, no journal in the world has any classification other than impact factor. That's it.
I never heard of that. Yeah.
Institutions, now if you work for a certain place and they want you to publish in a certain journal, they are free to choose whatever classification they want.
Yeah, but that's completely subjective, isn't it?
That's totally subjective.
Yes.
And because, for example, if you have a journal in a certain area with a very high impact factor, doesn't mean that's the best journal in the world.
Obviously not.
Very
Yeah.
specific, very area. So there is nothing like something that you can generalize. And there are journals with not very high impact factors that are well read. I mean, there are so many ways that you can make impact factor.
Yeah. Yeah, actually yes. You can always manipulate it. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sorry, I never heard of this ABCD or ABDC. What you said. Yeah, I have no idea about that. Yes. Yes, Scopus indexing, that is something important, and that is something relevant, of course. So Scopus is something, it is it's a large, basically it's a large online database, on abstracts and indexes, and it's maintained by Elsevier. It's maintained, it has nothing to do with the impact factor. No, Scopus has nothing to do with the impact factor. Scopus, it's completely independent, okay? So it indexes and lists all kind of titles and abstracts. So it's basically an online database, but there is always a review. So anything and everything doesn't appear on Scopus. So they have an annual review system, and they have some criteria as well for selecting which titles will be indexed and which will be not. Okay. So most of the good journals and even like the book series, the proceedings, the major ones, because Scopus is maintained by Elsevier. Okay, it's owned by Elsevier. Okay. SCI is again something different. It's an indexing service. So it's an online database system like Scopus, but it mostly includes everything from SCI is basically Science for Science Citation Index. All right. So it includes most of the journals which is published across the breadth in science, engineering, social sciences. Okay. Sorry. So Scopus, that's what I just mentioned. So it's just that Scopus is maintained by Elsevier. It's also an online database, an aggregate and indexing service, and SCI is also an indexing service. But SCI typically SCI contains only the top, I think the top 10% by impact factor rankings of each subject area of the journals. Because there is something again called SCI-E, which is SCI expanded.
Now impact factor doesn't matter.
What, sorry? I'm sorry, I didn't follow. What?
Just now you have told, no, sir.
Yes, impact factor doesn't matter,
have
you mean? Yes, impact factor doesn't matter.
So now you said like top 10 will come under SCI.
Yes, if you can publish in those, in the top impact factor journals, of course, very good for you. But what I'm trying to say here is, my message is, I'm not trying to explain the difference in Scopus and SCI or impact factors.
Yeah,
what I'm trying to say is, I'm trying to say how you should maximize the impact of your work. All right. So of course, if you think that your work deserves to be published in a 25 impact factor journal, you should definitely try. Yeah, but trust me, what happens is, because I can tell you from personal experience, you lose a tremendous amount of time running behind these journals. Okay. So if you want to publish quickly and if you want to publish efficiently, so don't go by the very high impact factor journals, rather try to focus on something which is more realistic and which you believe that the journal which you believe that you have a very higher chances of getting published. All right. If you have, of course, if you have time and if you want to pursue a paper for like 3 years in any journal and you can wait for that, if you can, afford the luxury of that amount of time, of course, you're always welcome. Sure. Please, one at a time, because if everybody's speaking together, I can't follow. Yeah. Oh, don't talk about UGC because, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that here. I'm not really sure what they are doing or what they actually wish to do in the future. But Scopus, I can tell you, they have a very stringent review criteria. All right. So sometimes it is also found that even very good journals, as Professor Nanan was just mentioning, that they try to boost the impact factor, like well-known journals, I'm not going to name them, but they have tried to boost their own impact factor by increasing self-citations. Okay. So people were encouraged to cite the papers they had published previously in the same journal. So of course that really boosts the impact factor. And if these kind of practices are found, because the Scopus, the people who maintain these databases, they are intelligent and smart people. Okay, and it's not very, especially nowadays, it's not really difficult to find out these things. Data is available like just peanuts. So if they find these things, of course, they always have the right to kind of disapprove or take the journal off the indexing list. Or they can always, or even any kind of malpractice which is found in terms of from the side of the journals, Scopus or any indexing service, they are always welcome to strike off the journal from that list. So it doesn't mean that if a journal gets indexed in Scopus, it will remain in Scopus forever. All right, so there is no assurance of that because they have an annual stringent quality check on the performance of the journals. Right?
Sir,
Yeah.
excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
So what is the significance of site factor and SNIP apart from impact factor?
So this SINP is actually SNIP.
Source normalized impact
factor. The source normalized impact factor is mostly to do with the individual articles. All right. So when you talk about one single article, when you're talking about the impact factor, it represents the impact factor of the journal. But source normalized impact factor is more related to one specific article in that particular topic of work. Okay. And somebody was asking something here.
SCI is there, no, sir?
Yeah, SCI expanded, they are the same as I said. So SCI basically it contains the top 10% of the journals in each field by ranking. Please sit down. And SCI expanded basically it contains all of it, the rest of it.
So which is having highest respect, sir? SSCI or Scopus Index or Thomson Reuters or Web of Science?
If SCI contains the top 10% of the top 10% journals of each subfield, definitely SCI has more credibility than, not credibility I would say, but more respect than Science Citation Index expanded, so SCIE. All right. So it has nothing really, so these indexing, indexing has nothing to do with the recognition. So the only quality criteria, the only number which matters for any journal is actually the impact factor. So if it's, this is something which I have always found at all these engineering institutes, that people really care a lot about this SCI, SCIE, Scopus. If you go to when I go to any of these, like these basic science institutes, most of the people they are not even aware of it. They don't even know about Scopus or maybe SCI or SCIE. Because but at the end of the day, what only matters is the impact factor. But I know for engineering people, for engineers or yeah, for technical people, this actually counts, because of course people count that, even people, I've seen people writing it that, so many SCI index, I don't know, papers are published in SCI Scopus journal or SCI papers. Charan, can you just ask them to start the air conditioning? Sorry?
Your Springer journal, with respect to Taylor's,
Which journal are you talking about?
beginning in the slide, sir.
No, are you talking about any specific journal?
Yes, Springer journal mentioned with respect to Elsevier and Francis and Taylor and Francis, but you didn't speak with respect to IEEE transactions, sir.
IEEE transaction is not really a major publisher.
Okay, sir. Okay.
They have
And people feel that is
they
the.
are not really a major academic publisher. They are way behind. I was talking only about the top academic publishers in terms of numbers. They only publish some engineering, mostly, not some, I know they publish a significant number of engineering proceedings, but I'm talking about the global academic publishing. Right? Okay, so of course, so now when we're talking about choosing the journal, so some of the questions which might help you in picking the right journal, the most appropriate journal. The first one which you should keep in mind is that where are the findings relevant? So if you think that your findings are relevant globally, all right, your results are relevant globally, then you should always pick an international journal which has a much wider reach. But if you think that your findings are relevant only locally, as Professor Naran was mentioning yesterday, I don't remember, he gave an example of some I think, we're talking about some concrete and fly ash, I think. He said that, there is some fly ash which you can find only some part of Andhra Pradesh, and you can make some concrete or something out of it. Of course, it's not relevant for the entire world to, it's not interesting for them to know about it, because it's only relevant for a local audience. So just to give you an example, so if you think that your findings are only relevant for a local audience, you should always pick a more regional journal, so that you reach, so your idea is, as I said, to reach the correct audience, the target audience, okay? So the second question is that whom are the findings relevant? So do you think that your results are only relevant for the people who are working in your field of work? So then you should always choose a very specialized journal, very focused journal, which publish only, it's not only civil engineering, maybe only a small subset of civil engineering, so that you're targeting a very specific community, specific people, a group of people. But if you think that it's not only relevant to your immediate field, but it's also relevant to some allied fields, some interdisciplinary fields related to your field, so in that case, you should always go for a broad focus journal, okay? The third one is, of course, accessibility. This is something very, so it's very tricky and it's very relevant, especially nowadays research. So what do you think about the accessibility? Like, how much accessibility do you need, or do you feel your article should have? So of course, you can always go for the age-old, age-old subscription-based journals, which are, tried and tested, and they're well recognized and reputed and everything. But then in that case, if you think that it's only the accessibility is okay if it's only restricted to academicians who have access to these journals, then it's fine. But if you think that you feel that your article should be accessible to everyone, like all the academic scientific community all over the world, all across the world, irrespective of the fact whether they have access to those journals or not, then you should always choose open access. Now, open access is something which is very I would say it's a little not well accepted here yet in our country, because I think we are not yet so open to open access. So I think it will still need some time before we actually understand the significance of open access, because I don't know how many of you are familiar with the idea of open access. Do you know what open access means, right? Anyone here who doesn't know what open access means? No, everybody knows what open access is. Good. So the idea was that the concept of open access, why was it brought about? So of course it basically started in Europe and US and in the Western world, obviously. And the idea was that they felt, so the people who are putting money in the research, they felt that, see, you are doing your PhDs, right? You're doing your PhDs or research or scientists, okay? So you get a lot of funding, okay? So funding from the state, essentially from the state, from the government. But where does that money come from? It's not the government's money, right? So it's the people's money. So it's the taxpayers' money. So if the people are actually indirectly funding your research. So their philosophy was, the people who actually initiated this whole concept of open access, that the people who are actually indirectly funding your research, they should also have free access to that research. All right? So for open access, what you need is, you just need a very decent internet connection. That's it. And anyone, anywhere in the world can immediately read your article, your work. So that was the main philosophy behind open access, was the fact that, yeah, the people who are actually, like paying for the work, for the research that you're doing, they should also have free access to it without having to pay for it or without having to subscribe for it. Okay. So that was the whole idea. But still, I think it's not easy, because here especially, I mean, like in developing countries like here in India or Brazil or China, well, China I'm not sure, but still here, as for example, I'm not sure, because it's not easy to get the funding. So what my friends in the UK and Germany, they tell me is that, so now when they write proposals, they always have a certain amount of money which is earmarked for open access publication. Okay? So when they get the funding, they already get the money to publish open access. But now that has another, like a kind of a reverse pressure. So basically it's on them, it's really on them that they have to actually publish some articles, some work, some papers in open access journals, which of course is not always easy, all right? So it doesn't mean that publishing in open access journals is very easy. So it works like, yeah, it works both ways, okay? Now talking about open access, the advantage of open access is not only restricted to accessibility, all right? So there are a few other benefits. So which is, for example, sometimes it helps to fulfill the mandates of the institute or the funding agency, the funder's mandate. So again, this is not, as I said, it's not very common here, but if you're working in the UK, US, or in the European countries, sometimes there is a mandate from, as I already mentioned, that from the funding agencies or the institutes, that you do have to publish a certain number of open access articles a year. Okay, so that is one advantage. Of course, the second one, which we already talked about, is it gives you an increasing accessibility and obviously readership. And the second one is, of course, that if your article is free to access, of course, obviously it will lead to a higher number of downloads, and if it's downloaded more, it always increases the chance of getting cited more. Okay, so other thing is that most subscription-based journals, they take when you publish in subscription-based journal, they take this copyright. Okay, so the publisher has the copyright because you sign the copyright transfer form actually. But in most open access journals, the author, that is you get to retain the copyright. Okay, so you can use it for to republish or do whatever you like. And of course, then the next one is of course it has a short publication time for obvious reasons, because open access journals are online only journals. They don't have print. So obviously they don't have to wait for the next issue or the next volume to come out. So as soon as it's accepted, so from the time of publication, from the time of acceptance is much shorter compared to the regular subscription-based journals. And the last one is, of course, again, this is not entirely true again, I would say. Of course, it has less restrictions, let's say, less restrictions on word limits or page limits compared to the print journals or the subscription-based journals, for obvious reasons, because for the print journals they have to keep the cost within a list, because they cannot really go for indefinite number of pages. So that's why there is always a word limit or a page limit. But in most open access journals, most of them, I would say, they don't have any restrictions on that. Okay. Right, so these are some of the advantages. But now the tricky thing is that, I think somebody was asking, and somebody mentioned this a while ago, that is, are all open access journals good? All right. So this is the point. So this is very interesting, because there are actually a good number of journals, which I don't know how many of you are familiar with. You might have encountered them in your working life, which actually, they pretend to be open access journals. They are open access journals, but they are fake journals, all right? So we call them predatory journals. So the idea is that how do you escape, or how do you save yourselves from falling prey to these predatory journals? So if you'll find a lot of these journals, you keep getting a lot of these emails, you submit in this journal or that journal. Most of these journals are called international journals, some international journal of something, blah, 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 whatever, because everything is international. And of course, they'll tell you that, yeah, you submit your article and then, you know, like you give, like you pay, I don't know, 5,000-10,000 rupees and then you are published within a week. Okay. I know it's very tempting. Of course, you want to publish quickly. And of course, all these journals, all these predatory journals, they have very, very good impact factors, or something like what you were saying, global, or I don't know, universal, or impact factor. I have no idea what that means. But anyway, so they have really very, very good impact factors. And you might, you know, like, I can understand it, you might easily fall prey to one of them. But the idea is that how do you actually avoid or escape these predatory journals? Because of course you don't want to publish in them because it is not indexed anywhere, it is not recognized anywhere, it will never be indexed anywhere. So if you do end up publishing in any of these journals, basically your work goes down the drain. Okay. So how do you recognize a trustworthy journal? How do you identify one? So the idea is, the first thing you should look for is that, can you identify the publisher? All right. So when you are looking at the journal homepage, you always try to see if you can identify the publisher. Do you know the name of the publisher? Is it like a well-known name or not? All right. The second thing is the editorial board. Okay. So you go to the journal web page and you look at the editorial board. But this again is very dicey, because most of these predatory journals, what they do is they have, you know, like an editorial board of maybe 20-30 people with top, like, scientists from across the world, across the globe. And it's very easy, because most of these people, they don't even know that their names are over there. Because of course they are not going to check every day on internet and search where their names are appearing. So obviously it's not possible. So this again is not a sure shot way of identifying one predatory journal. But still, you know, if you look at the editorial board and you see some names are familiar, you know them directly or personally, you can always cross-check that with the person, with the concerned person, that, okay, are you aware of this journal? I was thinking of submitting one, so can you advise me on that? So for that. All right. Third one is, of course, indexing. Very important, of course, because most of the recognized and the good journals in any topic, any subject, they are always indexed by any of these top indexing services like Scopus or SCI or Web of Science. Okay. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that if a journal is not indexed in one of these databases, it's a predatory journal. Because a lot of times it happens is that if it's a new journal, all right, a very new journal, maybe it came up a year ago or so, if it happens so, it will never appear on any of these online databases, because it takes at least a few years before a journal is recognized by these online databases or these indexing services. So this again is not a 100% like a sure shot way, a foolproof way of identifying one, but these are, you know, just to give you ideas, of course. Authors, very important. You can always go, because it's an online only, you can access all the articles, you know, which were published recently. You go through the list of the publications, like the recently published articles which appear on the journal, and you go through the names of the authors, see that if you can identify them, see if you recognize them, see if anyone you know that have published there. So if you know somebody, you can always again, you know, like ask them that, okay, fine. So like, yeah, is it okay? Is it trustworthy? Is it good? Is it reliable? All right. And of course, very important, and this is a very key point to, I would say, to be careful about, is the publication fees. So all open access journals, actually, they charge an article processing fee. So there's a fee for publishing, right? But the thing is that none of the standard and reputed open access journals take money from you before your article is actually accepted for publication. Only once you receive the final confirmation from the journal editor that your article has been selected for publication in this journal will you get, or will you be asked to pay for it. All right. If any journal, any open access journal is asking for any money, doesn't matter, like, yeah, if it's like 10 rupees or 10,000 rupees, if they're asking for any money before your article is actually reviewed or even accepted for publication, you should be very careful. You should be really try to avoid submitting in these kind of journals. All right. So this is a very important point, very important feature to keep in mind when you're not sure and you're not certain about a certain journal. Okay. Any questions? Why?
Conference proceedings any conference proceedings, they are having lesser respect than these journals. Why so, sir?
Why
saw.
do you say that? I don't know.
Means conference proceedings or conference publication, they are having a lesser respect or will consider
No, because
less value
because
as
the
compared to journal.
conference proceedings or book series, they don't have impact factors, and people prefer to publish in journals more than in proceedings, just because they don't have impact factors. So they want to publish in journals because I don't think they have less importance. Some of our proceedings books, they are downloaded significantly more number of times than journal articles. So it's really an entirely wrong notion to say, or if you think that journal or like proceedings articles or proceedings publications have less significance compared to journal articles. It's a notion among scientists or even researchers that they prefer to go for journal articles because, yeah, it's a journal article and there is more weightage. And then again, somebody will give me an example of UGC, which I don't want to hear, but anyway, that is different, all right?
And how about DBLP server, sir? DBLP indexing.
Yeah, about what?
DBLP.
Yeah, how about what? Like what do you
Means that also one of the good indexing server
Yes.
as compared to Scopus
Yes,
Index.
yes, sure, of
So
course.
that-
The DVLP is a recognized indexing
Okay,
service, of course.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
that's perfectly fine. But your question was about conference proceedings and journal articles, right?
Yeah, sir.
Yes. Okay, well, it has nothing to do with open access, but still, I mean, yeah, that's what my point is that journal conference proceedings are equally important as journal articles. But it's just that journal articles are, like, yeah, they're more fancy because, yeah, they have impact factors. And proceedings books or book series, they don't have impact factors, all right?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
What is the difference between green open access and gold open access?
Yeah, that's a good question because, yeah, this is something which we don't really talk about in a lot of these workshops or these. Green gold open access is it's a little tricky because in green open access you have the option of like publishing your work after there is an embargo of 1 year or 2 years, and after that you can always actually you retain the copyright, but you can also publish it in any online repository, any free repository, because of course you retain the copyright. But in gold open access you actually can't do that. Okay, so this is essentially the big difference. Of course, both are open access. In both cases, you pay for the publications, you retain the copyright, that's fine. But in green open access, you have more freedom. That's it. Oh, in terms of money, I cannot give you the numbers, but of course, it really depends on these are really the journal policies. It really varies from journal to journal. So that's why, I mean, even, yeah, that's another advice I would like to give because people face a lot of confusion. When we were talking about hybrid journals in the beginning, so you should be very careful, when you're submitting articles in these hybrid journals, there is always like a tick box that do you wish to publish open access. Like, be sure before ticking that. We have received a lot of problems in the last few years since this hybrid journal started. People don't think and they mistakenly, or I don't know, like really unmindfully click on the box and then they say that, oh, no, we don't want to publish open access. It's the moment they get the, the invoice or the money, they get the email that you have to pay this amount of money for open access. They said, no, we don't want to, we're not interested in publishing open access. But then why did you click the box? Because, yeah, you should read. So that's why when you're submitting in these open access journals, when you're given an option, you know that it's not only an open access journal. So you know that it's you want to go for the subscription, the regular journal, and you don't want to go for the open access option, open access model. So be sure that you don't tick that box, okay? Because everything is automatized. So once you tick it, it's automatically the information is registered that okay, fine. So the author is interested in going for open access.